So we're going to have a great story from Vistaprint today. Just before we get started, I just want to understand from the audience, who's from the tech side? Can you please raise your hand? Okay. Who's from the business side? Okay. So today we got both, which is what I really like with this story as well. We got both Jen, who's going to give the story from a business perspective, and we got Dave, who's going to give you the technical side as well. So you're going to get both sides of the story. It's a great story. It's about how Vistaprint rolled out JIRA Service Desk from 2 to 22 locations. So if you want to join me in welcoming Dave and Jen on stage.
Thanks, Christoph.
And you got the clicker here.
Okay, great.
On to you.
Thanks for having us today, everyone. Just for a show of hands, who here has ever ordered from Vistaprint? Oh, good. We have a nice client base here. See if I can get the clicker to click. So I'm going to ask Dave my technical support.
Push the forward button.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Proof that he's a great technical manager. I'm Jen Callos. I'm an associate director at Vistaprint.
I'm Dave Sonderling. I'm the internal tools technical manager at Vistaprint.
And we'd like to thank you for joining us today. So hopefully many of you already know what Vistaprint is, but I'll give a quick overview to those that may have not ordered from us before. We're an online supplier of marketing materials and services, and we serve both home and family. You can order your Christmas cards or mugs and calendars, or also for businesses. Many people have ordered business cards as well as other marketing materials. And our mission at Vistaprint is to empower millions of people worldwide to make a living, make a connection, and make a difference with our products and services. Now, how do we accomplish this mission? We're a global company. Last year, we did over $1.2 billion of revenue, and we're at almost 5,000 employees. Those employees are across 22 offices worldwide. You can see our map pretty disparate in terms of locations. And those locations, we're a vertically integrated company. So those locations make up our corporate offices where we have developers, marketing, finance, legal. We also have really huge manufacturing plants where we manufacture all of these products. We also have call centers. Those are 24/7, hundreds and hundreds of call agents taking calls that serve our end customers. And across all these locations, and for all these employees, we offer many support services. These services range from things like your typical IT desktop services, I need VPN help, I forgot my password, as well as these teams also support, travel applications. I don't know how to expense my travel, or I need a new desk, I need a new desk chair, or I need some other facility, I need a new badge. So we have a lot of teams and a lot of support teams that were spread out across the globe. So before we jump into Service Desk and the solution, we want to tell you a little bit about our challenge and what we looked like 12 months ago.
So before we started even considering JIRA Service Desk, we were already using a legacy help desk system to track all the sorts of requests Jen was talking about, everything from travel to desktop support. And the legacy system had a lot of issues. The first and biggest issue was that there were just too many choices for the customers when they were going to report an issue. They would sign in, and the very first thing they had was a list of over 60 services they had to choose from. And just an example, you come in the morning, you don't have internet access, but all your Cube neighbors do. So do you file that under network? Do you file that under desktop support? Maybe there's 2 or 3 other services that it could potentially be. So you're not really sure where to send your work. And unfortunately, those service choices were used to route that work. So we ended up with a lot of misrouted tickets that had to be passed back and forth between teams. We ended up with some lost work that would end up in the wrong queue, and the team would just ignore it because it clearly wasn't theirs. In addition, the legacy system was reliant on an old version of ActiveX, and so both customers and agents could only use IE8 to use the system, which, I mean, we're talking, this is 2013. They're reliant on IE8, so that's a real problem. The tool had a concurrent user license scheme that was pretty expensive. We had about 30 licenses total across all of our offices, and this is just for officers or agents who are acting on the tickets. But we had to implement a timeout so that they weren't locking each other out. So even agents who were sitting in the tool all day would basically have to re-log in every 15 minutes to see the work that they're actioning. There was no reporting. There was no real beautiful way to represent what work was coming in, what work was going out. There were a few limited static reports, but they were based on use cases that the vendor had come up with long before we brought the tool online, and we couldn't customize them to our needs. The database was really obscure, sort of intentionally obfuscated, so we would make a custom SQL report for one user, but we couldn't then extend that to other users. It was sort of, each report was one use only, and that was really painful. There were no real options for extensibility or integration. We'd done a few extensions early on, and we'd basically used up our ability to do that. So overall, the feedback on the system was incredibly poor. We had customers who were frustrated because they didn't know where to file their tickets or how to file their tickets correctly. We had managers who couldn't see what work was coming into the system and what work was being actioned on. And sort of in between these two, we had the agents who were working on the work in this outdated system in IE8 and were unbelievably frustrated, complaining all the time, really having a hard time with it.
Thanks. So Dave talked a lot about our technical challenges, but we also had process challenges. So definitely this project that we embarked on was a combination. And so we talked about the services. Here's some example services, asset management, your typical local desktop support. We have a team in every single location practically. Every type of IT support as well as the other facilities and other support teams. And each team had a different process. Some teams used our legacy system, some teams used email, some teams used walk up. Our legacy system, when you had to choose a service, it was a long list, literally just bulleted list of 60 plus services. No search features, no categories. And every time you filed a ticket, you got a different experience. Maybe this team answered you within an hour, this team answered you within a week. This team maybe waited 3 days to realize you filed your ticket in the wrong place, then forward it to another team, which might wait 3 days to realize they forwarded the ticket to the wrong place. So it just was not a great experience. So as part of improving our technology, we also had aspirations to create a central service desk team. And our service desk lead is in the audience today with us at Atlassian, so you can definitely speak with her later. And we basically had aspirations to head up a team that would triage all of these tickets from all these teams, as well as work on and solve the issues that they were able to. And so we'll talk a little bit about how we did that. But in addition to the tooling, we wanted a process where customers had a reliable process, had a predictable response time for at least level 1 triage or level 1 support, and that we had a team that was equipped with solving the issues as much as possible, and if not, forwarding them to the right team. So this kind of leads into, here are the business reasons that we were looking for a tool, as well as the technical reasons. And so Dave's going to talk about why Service Desk stood out to us as a great solution that would meet our needs.
Thanks, Jen. So before we'd even heard of JIRA Service Desk, we were already considering a homegrown solution on JIRA. We'd been using JIRA for about 10 years at that point, and we'd had a lot of success in our development teams. We'd used it for some other uses, some project management stuff, but mostly centered around the development teams, and that was the main focus. So Jen and I were basically working together to gather requirements from all the teams who were going to be moving over to the new tool and designing this custom homegrown, custom workflow, custom screens, and figure out exactly what we needed, maybe use some add-ons to extend into functionality we didn't have. And it made sense because we had a huge investment in Atlassian already. We were using JIRA, we were using extensions like JIRA Agile, we were using some of the development tools like Crucible and Fisheye. So we figured since we were already invested in this ecosystem and it wasn't a big change for us, JIRA made great sense as a platform. And then I came to the summit last year and I saw the presentations for JIRA Service Desk, and I was literally texting my teammates, one of whom is in the audience right now, saying, I can't believe it, this is exactly what we're designing. And so I came back from the summit and sat down with Jen and I said, we need to go back over our requirements and see, does this meet our needs? And we sort of figured out right out of the box, JIRA Service Desk met about 80 to 90% of our needs without any custom configuration, without any changes. So comparing it against our legacy system, obviously it has modern browser support. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but imagine if you were using IE8 every day, if someone said, you can stop, you can use Firefox, you can use Chrome, you'd cheer, There were no session timeouts. In fact, it wasn't going to be a huge uptick in price for us, which was important because we didn't have a lot of sponsorship of this project. So it was mostly going to be using the user counts we already had in JIRA. We had a few users look at it very early on. They all told us they really liked the look and feel. We started talking about, well, what kind of reporting could we do out of this? What would it look like? And we were already using different dashboards in JIRA. We had already brought on JIRA Agile, so we had the Kanban board view, the Scrum board view. And we'd built a lot of external reporting through SQL that went into our wiki software, that went into desktop reports. Everybody in the company is familiar with the JIRA schema already, so sort of like if somebody wanted a report of what Service Desk was doing, it was really easy to get that out of JIRA Service Desk. And finally, we knew that whatever we didn't have, we could extend into. JIRA had the entire JIRA Atlassian marketplace. We were already using JIRA Enterprise Mail Handler and a couple of other custom add-ons. And the biggest win for us was that after going through requirements and doing our design again, we realized that we could cut down to 2 choices for a customer coming in to log a ticket. They would choose either they needed some local desktop hardware installed, so they need a new mouse, they need a new keyboard, or they needed more general support. It could be anything, and that would get routed to the service desk and then routed to the appropriate second-tier team or even resolved in first tier. Moving from 60-plus choices down to 2 was huge, and it made a big difference in customer satisfaction.
I'm going to talk a little bit about our implementation approach. Some of you may be in the shoes that we were in many months ago and saying, like, how do you get from this sounds like a great idea to it's live and it's working across the globe? I'll tell you a little bit of a story kind of lead up to that, and Dave will enjoy this. 3 years ago, Dave and I put together a project proposal because Vistaprint, being a large company, has a project planning process. And we, after looking at a few of the vendors that were playing in the space at that time, said, well, this is going to take 12 to 18 months and about 20 resources and lots of money. So we put together this project proposal, put it forth, and guess what? Got rejected. When you compare this to the other business initiatives and new strategies and new product launches, the value is hard to justify. So the next year, 2 years ago, we said, well now, we really need to update it. Put the project forth. Anyone want to guess what happened to it? Rejected. 1 year ago, put it forth again. Guess what happened? Rejected. So when Dave came back from Atlassian and said, we already have the infrastructure in place, the cost is pretty low, let's see what we can do with the out-of-the-box approach. I said, great. So we pretty much took some of Dave's time, some of my time, one of his teammates' partial time, and a part-time co-op. We said, let's see what we can do. So this is just to show you that it can be done. Despite getting rejected 3 times, we were able to power through. So we spent 4 weeks just evaluating out of the box. Instead of starting from scratch and saying, let's custom design and write down 100 pages of requirements, why don't we start with what JIRA Service Desk has to offer and see what the gaps are? That seemed like a quicker way to get to our end result. So Dave's team installed it out of the box, and we looked at it and we said, looks pretty close to what we need. After that, there were a few configuration changes in terms of team routing that Dave will talk about later, and a few other field customizations, but pretty minor. It was a part-time of one of his people for 4 weeks to pretty much get it to a point where we were ready for testing. So we then try to involve the people out in the globe. Dave and I can say the solution looks great, but the real people are the agents, the customers, and getting those feedback. So we actually asked for volunteers in our different desktop support locations. We got 10 different volunteers, and they used our test system, and they basically sent through tickets and really practiced routing tickets among each other to make sure that it worked properly. We got a little bit of feedback, not too much, and that took us another week of partial person's time to incorporate that. And then we were ready for a pilot. So we piloted 2 locations. So there's, as you can tell, with 5,000 employees, we weren't about ready to say, let's turn this on in one day in production. So we took 2 of our locations that, maybe it incorporated about 10 to 15% of our population. And we said, okay, we're going to turn them on, and we turned global Service Desk on. So basically, Service Desk was somewhat split. A bunch of them were still using the legacy system, and a couple of them were using JIRA Service Desk. And we limited that to 2 weeks because you can imagine running a dual system is challenging. So we said, okay, let's we're pretty close. Let's do 2 weeks to make sure that we get our feet wet, but we're not going to do it for long because we're a dual system. So after that, the changes that we had were very minimal. Maybe a little bit of reporting, some documentation, but other than that, we are ready. And Dave will talk a little bit about how we eased the transition for users and made it there was hardly any impact and hardly any change for them, the way that we transitioned and integrated with our legacy system. So we were actually able to roll out from 2 locations to 22 locations globally in 3 weeks. For those techies out there, you'll now get excited for Dave. Dave's a little bit details, and you can talk to him after the talk, but he'll tell you a little bit about what we did.
Yeah, I'm going to dive into some of the details. So because the old UI was reliant on IE8 for our legacy system, most of the customers, the non-agents, were used to filing their tickets via email. They would send email to this inbox Service Desk ticket, and it would create a ticket in the help desk system, and that would get routed according to a couple of custom rules that we built there. We want a very similar experience for JIRA Service Desk, and we want it to have minimal impact on our users. We want it to feel like there was no change in system to them. So what we ended up doing was using Exchange. We created transport rules on an inbox, on the Service Desk ticket inbox, that would add a couple of JIRA directives and then forward over to our JIRA system. These directives were things like what the issue type was going to be and the priority. And we also added what the user's office was, because we needed to know if this was a desktop support issue that needed hands-on help, we needed to know what office, what second tier team that needed to be routed to. We use JIRA Enterprise Mail Handler internally, as I mentioned, and so we were able to use that to parse out all those custom fields, create the ticket, and then also to manage communication on that issue going forward. So when a comment was made on that ticket, it would email the customer would get that email, reply to it, it would end up as a comment back on the ticket. So we had a whole audit trail in JIRA, and to the customer, they were still using email the same way they always were. The impact to them was basically nothing. We have very few customers that use the portal before this, and actually the number's gone up a little bit since we moved to JIRA Service Desk. Two customizations that we made to make things easier for our agents. In our legacy system, we had the ability to assign tickets out to groups. Instead of saying, I'm not going to work on this, I'm going to give it to someone else to work on, we'd say, this isn't really for my team, this is for the network team, or this is something Service Desk needs to reroute because I'm not sure where it should go. So we accomplished this by creating dummy users that were tied to distribution lists in our Exchange system. And then we assigned those dummy users as component leads in JIRA. And we created a transition that went back to the waiting on triage step and allowed the user to reset the component to the correct team. And basically, it would set the assignee to be that component lead and email the whole team. So the whole team would get a notice that a new ticket had come in that was waiting on them to look at. They would go in and look at it, maybe assign it to a specific resource, or if they're working on a pull model, the resource would go in and say, I'm going to work on this and take it. Or if it wasn't for them, they could use this same process to reassign it to a different group. The last thing we made that we thought was kind of essential, because we wanted to let the agent teams, the tier 2 and tier 3 teams, move over when they were ready, was an ability to move back to our legacy system. So we created a custom add-on that basically allowed us to move tickets back to the system and closed as a post-workflow action. It was a workflow button where it would show you the group. You pick the group that was still in the legacy system, and it would close the ticket and create the ticket in the legacy system and link it back to JIRA if they needed to reference back to that ticket for any reason. This is pretty simple, and this list is actually pretty large compared to how many groups are now moved over to our new system.
Thanks, Dave. So for those of you looking to embark on such an endeavor, you might want to know, what are the lessons learned? What can we impart to you? And also, what did we gain? What did Vistaprint win out of this? In terms of lessons learned, kind of going back to my story of trying to submit this large project, demonstrate value quickly. As Dave said, we did a transition where we did Service Desk and a lot of the tier 2 agents in that big bulk move, but we left teams like, let's say, facilities or travel, and we let them move over when they want to. So if demonstrating value quickly caused people to say, wow, I can see the value, I can see the system is so much better, and I have so much added features that I want to move over. And that's exactly what happened. Secondly, start with a lower complexity team, but ideally has broad impact. In this case, we wanted to see how well Service Desk would meet, JIRA Service Desk would meet our needs. And we wanted to try and use most out-of-the-box functionality. So if we'd taken a really complex team, we might have taken many months to customize things, where we started with a team that pretty much had the do, doing, done workflow with a few extra statuses, but all 5,000 of our employees interact with this process. So it was able to give us a broad visibility. Third, default to standard functionality. We all know if you spent 3 to 6 months, your business folks often come up and say, here's my 100 requirements, and they're really using 10. Those 90 other ones are barely ever used. And it's really hard to take them out once you put them in. So Dave did a really good job of keeping us to the product and saying, kind of waiting till we tried it and then iterating with small iterations, adjustments as we needed. And finally, provide some integration back to your legacy system. If you do have a lot of teams like we did, 60 plus, or you have a large user base, it's going to be really hard to do that cutover in 1 day or 1 week. And so we did a big chunk of it, and then now we're allowing the final users to continue to move over as they're comfortable. In terms of the big wins, number one, reduce complexity. As you heard, our legacy system was very complex, both from a technology perspective as well as from a process perspective. Our Service Desk lead had this mantra: when someone files a ticket in our Service Desk, they will never turn them away. They will never say, I'm sorry, you filed it in the wrong system or the wrong process, please go here. We will always triage, we will always forward that ticket on. So that's a great user experience. Secondly, increased visibility. This goes from the lower level, like customers and agents, all the way to our senior executives. We can now access all our issues, understand what ticket everyone's assigned to. You can understand where your ticket is. In our previous system, customers never knew who was working on their ticket. They didn't have visibility. As with JIRA, we have the history, you have all the reporting. And of course, the executives have the high-level reporting. How's my capacity doing? What locations do I need to hire more people in? What teams are responding quicker than others? And finally, just the sort of qualitative, hard to measure. I can't show you a graph, but I can tell you people were pissed and complaining before, and now people are loving it. People are going in and saying, I'm going to file a JIRA ticket for that. I'm going to file a service desk request. And they can file it in various different means, as Dave mentioned, the portal, email, from their phone on email as well. One of the huge wins I talked about was visibility. So these are instant reports. It took me 30 seconds to create this report in JIRA Service Desk. It's totally configurable. In our old system, this was near impossible. So if you want to know what this data shows, it's one of the many reports we use. On average, our service desk team, like I said, we wanted a reliable response rate. 1.8 hours it takes them to respond to an issue for first-line triage. Then, on average, they resolve the issues that are able to resolve at Tier 1 within 28 hours. And then once that needs to get escalated to the Tier 2, Tier 3, then it bumps up to 141 hours. So again, this gives us visibility into how well we're doing in terms of response time initially, which teams are, how well we're doing on Tier 1, and of course, if we want to reduce that, where we need to focus. We also leverage third-party reporting. We use ClickView for more sophisticated reports that we can't do in JQL. One of our goals as a company is to push more down to Service Desk. As you saw in the previous slide, when it's resolved in Tier 1, you get a quicker response rate. And they're also in a lower cost location. And so we're trying to move as much as we can down. Distribution list creation, VPN, all that type of stuff, move it down. And so this report gives us visibility into Tier 1 as Service Desk, into how much Service Desk is resolving, and we're continually trying to drive that red bar bigger. And lastly, a system is only as good as how much you use it, how well it's used, how it's adopted, if people are actually using it. In the last month, we had almost 5,000 tickets created, and 4,875 tickets were resolved. So is the solution a success for us? 98.8% tickets resolved in the last month. I'd say so. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.